So let's talk about Venezuela. You've got a country that was literally floating on a sea of oil wealth, and now it's just drowning in crisis. How does that even happen? How does one of the richest nations on the planet just completely collapse? Well, we're going to break down the exact playbook that made it happen.
I mean, just look at this contrast. On one hand, you have the Venezuela we all remember, right? South America's richest country, a powerhouse, praised for its democracy. And then you have the Venezuela of today, a full-blown humanitarian crisis with hyperinflation and people struggling to find food. So the big question is, how do you get from there to here? That's what we need to unpack.
All right, to really get this, we've got to go back in time, back to what really felt like a golden age for Venezuela, an era that was pretty much defined by one guy and one single resource, a resource that turned out to be both a huge blessing and, well, an even bigger curse. So, under the super charismatic Hugo Chavez, Venezuela wasn't just doing well, it was a party, a full-blown, non-stop party. He comes to power in '99 promising to lift up the poor, and then boom, 2004 hits, and global oil prices go through the roof. It basically handed him a blank check. We're talking billions and billions of dollars flooding into the country, and Chavez used that money to fund these massive social programs. We're talking better healthcare, better education, poverty was nearly cut in half. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. This whole thing, this entire national project, was built on one single, dangerously unstable foundation: oil prices staying high. Forever. Okay, so Chavez's time in power comes to an end. But just as his handpicked successor is stepping onto the stage, the ground underneath that whole oil-soaked economy starts to shake. And I mean really shake. And that successor was Nicolás Maduro. Now, Maduro was, well, he was a different story. He was a former bus driver, a super loyal follower of Chavez for sure, but he didn't have that electrifying charisma, you know? He wasn't the political mastermind Chavez was. And he was about to walk straight into a perfect storm, one that would have been a nightmare for even the most experienced leader on the planet. So let's just state it plainly. What was the fatal flaw here? The whole system, the entire economic model, was a giant, high-stakes bet. It was a bet that oil prices would stay high forever. That's it. Everything, from food subsidies to healthcare, was funded by that one bet. The entire nation's well-being was tied to a single number on the world market. There was absolutely no plan B. And just as Maduro takes office, guess what happens? The house of cards comes tumbling down. Global oil prices crash. Hard. That river of cash that was funding everything, it just dried up. Overnight. The economy went into an absolute freefall. And by 2014, this wasn't some abstract economic problem anymore. This was about trying to find food in the grocery store. It became a desperate daily struggle for millions. And this wasn't just an economic crisis. It was a full-on human catastrophe. Seriously, just try to imagine this. 87% of the people in your country can't afford to buy enough food. Life just becomes a daily struggle for pure survival. So it's really no surprise that by 2016, as you can see, a whopping 84% of Venezuelans wanted Maduro out of office. So this is where it gets really crazy. This is the central question we have to ask. The economy is in ruins. Pretty much everyone wants you gone. So how on earth did Maduro manage to hold on to power? Not just hold on, but actually tighten his grip. Well, the answer has nothing to do with fixing the economy. Instead, it lies in a very deliberate, step-by-step political playbook, a playbook for how to seize a state. Okay, so let's walk through this playbook for absolute power. Step 1. He starts ruling by decree. He uses a law that was already on the books that basically lets him act like a king, creating new laws whenever he wants, no questions asked. Step 2. The real legislature, which is controlled by the opposition, tries to stop him. So what does he do? He just creates a whole new Supreme Court and stacks it with his loyalists. We're talking his wife, his son, you name it. Step 3. This new, loyal Supreme Court then declares that it's more powerful than the elected National Assembly. Just like that, the opposition is rendered completely powerless. And the final step, Step 4. Maduro holds this widely disputed election to create a new, parallel legislature, filled with, you guessed it, only his supporters. Game over. Now, this didn't happen in a vacuum. People weren't just sitting back and watching. There were massive, massive protests, international condemnation. Dozens of people were killed in the streets. But despite all that, the result was undeniable. Maduro had successfully taken apart every check and balance on his power, becoming the absolute most powerful man in Venezuela. So once he had total political control locked down, Maduro's government found another way to tighten its grip, this time on the economy itself, on the day-to-day lives of every single citizen. It was a system that created essentially two different currencies.
Okay, check this out. The government set an official exchange rate. $1 was worth 10 bolivars. Sounds great, right? Well, here's the thing. Only Maduro and his inner circle of generals and businessmen could actually get that rate. It was like a golden ticket. For literally everyone else, for the average citizen, the reality was the black market. And there, you'd have to pay 248,000 bolivars for that same US dollar. It was a system designed to make his friends rich and crush everybody else.
So, as you can imagine, with this kind of economic stranglehold, the hunger crisis just got worse and worse. The world was watching, and offers of help started pouring in. But the government's response wasn't just no thanks. It was something else entirely, something kind of surreal. So with people literally starving, international aid groups are trying to get food and medicine into the country. But Maduro rejected all of it. He called it a foreign conspiracy. And instead, to solve the massive food crisis, his government launched the Rabbit Plan. Yes, you heard that right. The government started handing out rabbit cubs to communities with the idea that people would raise them for meat.
And this is where you see the just mind-blowing disconnect between the government and the people. The plan was a total failure. Why? Because people didn't see the rabbits as livestock. They adopted them as pets. They gave them names, which forced the government to come out and make this statement: a rabbit is not a pet. It's 2.5 kilos of meat. It's just unbelievable.
And that whole rabbit plan, in a way, just perfectly captures the bigger tragedy here. The story of Venezuela's collapse is absolutely about political power grabs and terrible economic decisions. But it all started with that fatal flaw we talked about, betting the entire country on a single resource. It's a powerful warning about how fragile wealth can be, and it leaves us with this one big question to think about.